Right, so many thanks, Lucerne, for inviting me. I'm very honoured, very honoured. So 2020, what a year. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, the modus operandi of our work life has changed immeasurably. And worldwide unemployment increased exponentially. I'll argue in this presentation that the workforce of tomorrow, now more than ever, needs to become less compartmentalized and more reactive, adaptive, creative, and above all else, self-motivating. With the increase in remote teaching due to the virus disrupting timetables, self-motivation at home will be the skill that will keep our students attentive. I will explore how my own integrated epistemology could inform education practice so that the workforce of tomorrow become more motivated and are able to think outside the box, outside the silos of subject specificity, and thus become more fit for this brave new world, this new normal. And I will argue that as educationalists, yes, I'm talking to you, we need to open to a new paradigm which is based on integrated learning. And that we academics need to develop a mindset which can enable this paradigm to become a reality. Let me unpack the title of this presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a dream. I dream that the primary aim for all education is to develop the ability in learners to think for themselves. This would be a humanistic way of thinking about an education system which aims to empower students rather than to treat them like empty vessels into which facts are poured. The education system in the UK is a dehumanistic process. It's based on cultural transmission, which processes both knowledge and people in what Foucault called factories of order. We call them schools and universities. What my research has shown me is instead of teaching knowledge in silos, one subject in isolation to all others, a deeper, more relevant epistemology would be transdisciplinary study or integrated education. Note I use the word transdisciplinary and not cross-curricular because I argue that all our chosen disciplines connect and overlap. So transdisciplinary is a more integrated concept than cross-curricular. Semantics possibly, but a mindset definitely. Recognition of three extant approaches to pedagogy bring clarity to this debate. First, there is transmission teaching, which is the traditional one-way transfer of knowledge, skills, and values from teacher to learner. Second, transaction teaching, which emphasizes problem solving through a process of pupil-teacher interaction. And third, transformation teaching, which is holistic and non-compartmentalized and factors in cognitive, moral, spiritual, and socializing needs. Now, the dominant methodology in the UK is transmission teaching, where students learn to accept that knowledge has been logically organized for their benefit. However, Reed and Scott's analysis indicated that education should not just be about acquiring subject knowledge, training the learners for the workforce, but should be about acquiring the skill to transfer knowledge. Boozin and Dixon's research concluded that the mind does not generally think according to a collection code, like a Hoover sucking up information, but it thinks in images, keywords, and linked patterns using an integrated system, and that there were enormous improvements in the performance of learners who substituted mind patterns for more traditional methods of approaching and organizing transmitted information. When allowed to, students grab pieces of information which have many hooks attached to them, and this act encourages inquiring minds and self-motivated high-order cognition as tangential ideas and a more holistic picture of the topic come into focus. But as Peter wrote, are these ideas realistic in an education system which struggles to think outside the box, outside the boxes of subject specificity? After all, self-protected silos is a natural way of thinking about education, rather than education in the round. Organizational silos are pervasive in the education sector. Like the grains of silos that farmers use, these educational silos separate different subjects, teachers, departments, and even thought processes. Highly resistant to change, these silos can actually block access to the information they hold, thus thwarting positive change and deep discovery. Think about the dominant curriculum. Maths teachers focus on maths. Science teachers teach science. English teachers focus on English, and never the twain shall meet. Of course, compartmentalizing subjects is easier for the school administrator because such a curriculum, and easier to test too. And we all are well aware of schooled and teaching to test. Now, integrated studies give students the opportunity to use both modern technology and social engagement to increase their understanding. Peer-on-peer learning, facilitated by an expert or experts, the teacher, the teachers, is the way forward. By learning within a curriculum that uses real-world applications, students develop a better grasp of the material as they see how the topics relate to scenarios outside the classroom. By connecting the dots of science, chemistry, physics, and all the other subjects, history, geography, the humanities, we can make the learning experience more authentic and more relevant. So, could there be a need for a move away from single topic lesson plans and a need to de-silo the curriculum to give students exposure to a more sophisticated, integrated approach to learning? When I was brainstorming for this presentation, I thought about a subject that I know very little about, biology. My discipline is based in the English literature tradition. So I started thinking about a holistic approach to a biological scheme of work on, for example, and an obvious example, the human body. Could such a scheme of work incorporate exploration on chemical reactions, architecture, poetry, classical art, history of dissection, sculpture, literature, etc., etc., etc. What a series of lessons that would be. Real life, holistic, eclectic discovery, thinking outside the box, developing skills that the students will need in their future life world. And because employers are starting to become qualification blind, there is a need for educationalists to move educational objectives away from knowing information and towards holistic thinking, from knowing to thinking. Now, 3 quotes bring me to the foundation of what became the conceptual framework of my own research. René first, that the purpose of education is to lead children towards intellectual development. The second quote is Piaget. The aim of education is learning to learn. And the third quote, which synthesizes the first two, that the happiness of mankind comes from the education for life, which is about learning how to develop mental faculties, how to express opinions, and how to develop dialectic reasoning, what I call the Socratic method, or as Leonard Nelson wrote, making philosophers of students. The Socratic method. Now, Nelson's thinking in 1965 was a contemporized version of how Socrates examined the reputed wisdom of anyone he happened to meet. Socrates, it's reported, used to go into the marketplace and he'd begin by asking a stranger a question. Following the stranger's answers, a series of other questions were elicited and more answers were forthcoming. At this point, the stranger either revised his initial answer, offers an entirely new answer, admits to being unable to say what he knows, professes his ignorance, or marches off in a bad temper, which I hasten to add is not what I am suggesting we do to our students. We don't want to push them quite that far. In Nelson's seminal 1922 lecture, he extrapolated that it's only through constant pressure to speak one's mind, meet questions with judged answers, can the truth be understood that non-knowledge is the first step on the road to deep learning. Findlay advocated that the aim and objectives of pedagogy is for children to embrace their understanding of themselves and society, and in so doing, encourage them to imagine all that they could do and be in their lives. Finney writes that the teacher's task is to provide tools for constructing new autobiographical images. And he suggests that this is by taking students back to the past in order to contextualize their present inheritance of a previous society's discoveries, and then point the learners towards exploration of their own possible futures. This, I suggest, is a humanistic way of thinking about an education system which aims to empower students rather than treat them, as I have said already, like empty vessels into which facts are poured. My research points me towards integrated education, being less about knowledge transfer and more about transformational knowledge. Integrated education is mutually beneficial for the student, and my research has pointed me towards thinking for the teachers too, because the teachers start to know their students better. I want to explore for just a minute or two a case study. This was a workshop, a one-day workshop that I ran at the University of Warwick in England. It was one of many one-day workshops that I ran called Science Meets Shakespeare. Shakespeare is my particular subject. So this particular day was an outreach day for 120 mixed ability 14 to 15-year-old students from schools around the whole area near the university. The day consisted and started with an introduction by me on Shakespeare's history, setting a play, just one of his plays, A Midsummer Night's Dream in this case, in time and place. We all then participated in an interactive storytelling of the play, led by me, so that the students knew the whole story. So that was the literature side of the event. Then the 120 students were randomly split into 4 groups, not necessarily with their peers. And through the day, those 4 groups rotated around 4 classrooms, which were allocated to participating professors. And the topics that were being explored were law, chemistry, medicine, and neuroscience. 4 topics that would spring from the Shakespeare's story. Now, prior to that day, I had sent the story to each of the 4 professors involved in the workshop, and they inserted phrases that would lead from Shakespeare's story into their chosen topic. And all the sessions were based on Leonard-Nelson's thinking on Socratic teaching. So there was as much student-teacher interaction as peer-on-peer discovery. Let me give you just a couple of examples of the 4, out of the 4. So the law professor, I sent him an extract from scene 1, act 1, scene 1 of the play, or of the story in my case. And when I do this, which I hate doing, this is where the law professor inserted his own little phrases that he wanted to spring from, or it was just one phrase in this case, but here we go. Into the court in Athens comes old Aegeus, one of Dukes Theseus's chief advisors, who's made his way to see Theseus accompanied by his strong-willed daughter Hermia and 2 Greek lads, Demetrius and Lysander. Now, Aegeus was not happy. In fact, he was furious. Aegeus had chosen Demetrius to marry his daughter, but Hermia is refusing to obey her father. She wants to marry Lysander. Aegeus asks the Duke to evoke Athenian law, which gives the father control over his daughter's marriage and life. Full of vexation come I, Hermia. Either obey my orders, or to marry Demetrius, or be put to death. Now, the teacher's objectives during his session went like this, and this is what he wrote to me. In this session, we will begin with an introduction to the legal systems of ancient Athens and of the Greek philosophy and philosophical fascination with the concept of dilemma. A legal dilemma features in the opening scene of A Midsummer Night's Dream and provides the impetus for the escape of all 4 of the kids to the forest. Now, the session will proceed to introduce an example of a dilemma, the decision whether or whether not to separate conjoined twins. The group will be divided into subgroups with the task of preparing and presenting arguments on various sides of the conjoined twin debate. So that was one of the sessions. Let's give you a science session. This was the chemistry professor. And again, it's the first introduction to the fairy world in this story. And again, I'll do that when I come to inserts by the chemistry professor. The king of the fairies, Oberon, is unhappy. No, actually, he's furious. There's trouble in the fairy world, and trouble in the fairy world means trouble everywhere. Oberon has fallen out with his wife, Titania, and Oberon calls for his chief assistant, Puck, and orders him to fetch the flower called love in idleness. When this natural product is squeezed on a receptor, a sleeping eyelid, the juice will make the sleeping person fall in love with the next live creature he or she sees after waking. Puck, Oberon says, I plan to drop the liquor of my moody eyes wife when she is next asleep, and only I have the antidote and remedy. Puck is delighted by such mischief. After all, not all natural chemicals are good for you. And he rushes off to find the flower. Now, the teacher's objectives, the students will probably already know that atoms can join together to make molecules. But we will learn how the precise three-dimensional shape of these molecules determine what effect they have on the body. Oberon's eye drops need closer consideration. So, integrated education in practice. Shakespeare's story, English literature, flipping our way through to chemistry, neuroscience, sociology, all kinds of issues arise out of this. And it broadens the concept and the learning. It's hooks for the pupils to get hold of. I'm interested in this moment, this difficult global moment, that it could be an opportunity for a radical curriculum rebalance. We have an imperative as adults to focus on developing in our students dispositions such as creativity, critical thinking, decision-making, problem-solving, collaboration, resilience and adaptability. And post-COVID lockdown, we adults have this opportunity to promote curriculum rebalance and improved paradigm. Pause for a moment to look at the role of creativity and critical thinking in our adult lives today. At this COVID-induced moment in time, we need creativity in synthesizing possible alternative approaches to our teaching methods. COVID has forced us to seriously think about electronic pedagogy and remote learning. COVID lockdowns has forced us to rethink home working, and most important of all, this global pandemic has stimulated interdisciplinary and international scientific collaboration, which is creating new vaccines across country borders at record pace. We adults need developed critical thinking in our understanding of statistics, in examining evidence, in respecting individual perspectives, in understanding possible differences, in avoiding snake oil solutions like injecting bleach in order to inoculate ourselves from this virus, and in holding multiple possible solutions in our head as we work through this pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is what we adults need, why should we not want it for our children? Alongside a deep love of every subject discipline, not necessarily served up as separate lessons on a timetable, we need young people with a developed disposition for learning, because learning is fun. We need learners who will thrive at school, at home, in employment, and in the community in this brave new world, this new norm, which we are all going to have to adjust to. But until there is clarity on the benefits for well-planned integrated curriculum as a way of dealing with a crowded timetable, as a way of saving students time, and as a way of allowing them to carry out longer, more open and more substantial tasks, teachers will struggle to embrace transdisciplinary pedagogy and even to support the claim that knowledge could even be interrelated. It can be argued that only when the relationship between learning in school and learning for life is recognized will there be a consistent move towards an integrated timetable. I know an integrated timetable can endanger deep-rooted resistance from teachers. After all, the very idea is an invasion of their silos. But in conclusion, I would argue that an integrated timetable is actually the glue between students not only having a learning experience, but actually gaining deep lifelong skills, which will help them achieve the very best life that they possibly can. And that surely is what we want from all our students. I suggest that an integrated timetable is the difference between transmission and transformational pedagogy, and could offer the end users, our all-important students, a greatly improved paradigm. Thank you.